Shut down.
Okay, we're recording now. So George and Addy, thank you for coming on to the channel for our Sunday morning talk. A lot has been going on. Would you like to discuss what you've been doing the last week to just keep
Sure.
the subscribers updated?
Well, first of all, Paul, I want you to notice how much better looking and younger the channel looks now. You know, Addy cuts off about 35 years off the average age of the host. So that's nice. Then, so I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, George. I shaved too, Paul. I don't know if you saw that, but
No, I noticed.
One of my subscribers, Paul, one of them was like, "Don't cut your hair like Paul did. Paul lost all his sex appeal when he cut his hair."
Yeah, there was a big poll, and all the girls, had fainting spells. They're thinking that Addy would cut his Samson hair. But they all were in agreement. Get rid of the terrorist beard.
The majority won out for the beard, but no majority for the haircut. It was only pluralities. So we're gonna grow it out. I guess I didn't know this, but I guess the natives during World War II grew their hair out and they didn't cut it till the end of the war. I didn't verify that, but one of my subscribers told me that, and I was like, wow, it's quite interesting.
Cool story.
So maybe I should tap into my Central Native roots there,
Wow.
my Navajo talker roots, if there are any.
That's cool. That's cool. So what has been going on the last week for you?
So this has been a little bit quieter of a charrette. This has been more of an author charrette. What we do is these charrettes are design and workshops, basically retreats to normally work on news. We normally all work on a news story. We've done a lot of that with the election hacking. So Addy and I and 3 or 4 others have been working on that. But the other half of the time, we've been working on writing a new book about the election steal and some surprising roots that you're going to find to Peter Strzok and a guy named Warren Flood. I put the first chapter and introduction. Hasn't been edited by the great one yet, the chosen one. But I put it out on my Patreon so people can read it. And we're going to go all the way through all the links back to 1999 in Kosovo with David Petraeus, General Shelton. Peter Strzok is a runner for David Petraeus with these blackberries. We're going to run it all the way down and show you how these blackberries, you can just follow the bouncing ball and follow them all the way to the steal of the election 2020. And now they're being retired. I believe they're being retired as a covert encoding mechanism.
And Peter Strzok, I don't know if you knew this, Paul, is from your neck of the woods somewhat. He's actually from Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. So he's a Midwest boy like us, all of us.
Yep.
Well, what's your take with Sidney Powell and the conference with Giuliani? I mean, I watched the whole thing, but what's your take on it?
Well, this goes back to the book. The book will explain this, how the original group in Belgrade, Serbia, was called OTPOR, O-T-P-O-R. And all of these people, I mean, they changed the names, they changed it to Canvas. The N and the V in Canvas are for nonviolent. So these are mainly election flipping operations. All of those programmers, 51 programmers, come into, and they recruit some new guys, into Dominion voting systems. And if you want to look at who wrote the real code to do the election flipping, it's a program called SMOTE. It was written by a guy named Alec, A-L-E-K, Lazar, L-A-Z-A-R, Evic, E-V-I-C. That guy, Paul, was also the guy called Guccifer 2 in the 2016 election. And we're going to prove it. We're going to prove it that it was Peter Strzok giving orders to Warren Flood, meeting up there where he was born, Sault Ste. Marie, on Mackinac Island. The marching orders were given to Gretchen Whitmer. She was the go-between to communicate with the 5 other governors in the swing states and at these governors' conferences, which were encrypted. They were all in skiffs. I'm going to build the chain and show everyone how this was yet another takedown by Peter Strzok. The same way he tried to do the 2016 election operations, going to be the same guy doing the 2020 operations. I know that's a big, stretch for people, but we're going to show it to you.
Yeah, and so we're zoomed in now, right, on our military tracking, right? But let's zoom out,
Okay.
and look at the populace. I think more and more people are waking up and at least starting to question everything that's going on. I've just been looking on Twitter the past couple of days. It seems like more and more people, regardless of partisanship, are starting to think something's a little fishy. It does take time for everybody to to start to question, for that doubt to creep in.
Well,
Once
it's
it starts
interesting
to
you say
creep in,
that. When I do a video about this subject matter, in the chat box, more and more people are on the side of it being election fraud of some sort, some degree. At the very beginning, you could see it was like split. The Trump supporters said election fraud, and the Biden supporters said, "Oh, sore loser Trump supporters." But that whole sore loser Trump supporter rhetoric has pretty much died down. So it's interesting that I'm starting to see something very similar.
You did the video with Chris Hunter that talked about the IP address 82, 117, 198, 56. It sounds like a quarterback, but that quad notation, right, maps to where? It doesn't map to Venezuela. Sorry, Sidney Powell. Sorry, Rudy Giuliani. It maps to Serbia. It maps to Belgrade, Serbia.
I think that was probably Paul's more direct question, if I may speak for Paul a little bit. But I want to know too, George. We talked about it off camera. Why Venezuela? Why aren't they, pointing the finger at Belgrade?
They want to protect
socialist.
I mean, Strzok is being protected here. I'm not kidding.
Do you think Sidney Powell is protecting him?
She's not aware of that. I mean, I've met her. She's a very nice lady. She's a good person. I met her several times. I see her in court all the time. Okay.
Great accent.
Yeah, she's a very good person. Rudy Giuliani's got the best intentions, but they're not network experts, right? They don't do this for a living, right? The Chris Hunters of the world. I lived in this world. My brother lived in this world. We know what IP addresses are. We know what trace routes are. We know what pinging is. We know the OTPOR. We know Canvas. We know that Peter Strzok, General Shelton, David Petraeus. We've been saying it for 4 years. They're just getting it now, like it in the last minute. And they're dealing with things as you would see somebody in an emergency crisis situation deal with something. We've been talking about this for 4 years. The encrypted devices, all the use of DIA informants, how they're trained in Fort Huachuca, how there's advanced training in Redstone Arsenal here, one state away in Alabama, the whole thing. I've been publishing these IP addresses. So this isn't idle speculation. And this is the problem with not having open source. When you're trying to deal with everything in a tunnel, like Rudy and Sidney are, they're not going to feed you the full story. They're only going to feed you the part of the story that they want you to run off and try to go research. They want you to go think that Hugo Chavez, who I think is dead, flipped this election. Hugo Chavez didn't flip this election. Sequoia Systems was purchased by Dominion, right? It's a red herring, right? The real base of this is where you and Chris Hunter were pointing us, which is to Belgrade, Serbia.
What do you think, Andy?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense to me that it's a red herring. I mean, I was thinking of it from the terms of having a socialist, almost communist scapegoat, right? Where they're saying, oh, it's the socialists, it's Venezuela, therefore it's China, right? So I think that, and I know you speak out very strongly against CC people, and I think they are, the big threat externally. But I also think that people are more and more going to use them as the boogeyman, right? The new boogeyman of anything and everything. But I think the problem is not without; it is within. This
well, I think it depends on the group that you're talking to, which boogeyman they're more focused on. All right. So I'm a China hawk. All right. I'm concerned about losing hegemonic power in the Pacific. I've explained it multiple times and how they're tied to the weapon and how they want 21st century China. Now, when you look at the mainstream media and what just happened at APEC, their virtual little conference that they had, President Xi kept on talking about rebooting TPP, coming together with the United States, reaching to, President-elect Biden. Biden even signaled on one of his speeches of rebooting TPP, and that would be better for American jobs, which I think is totally false. I think Trump proved that, send the jobs back to the United States and people will be employed. It's pretty simple. This idea that send jobs overseas and Americans will benefit, this is beyond my comprehension. And I have a PhD in finance. I totally disagree with the stance of going more integrated with China, that we need to box them in. That's my stance. Now, what's also important to, as a data point, is that the CFR magazine, Foreign Affairs, they keep on putting exposés about Biden, being pro-China. We're going to have more stability in the world and less chaos because of the Trump administration, and that we'll be able to get what we needed done in the Middle East done. Well, what that's code for is Syria to become a battleground, and so you have the John Bolton hawks that want to ramp up a war in the Middle East, but you have Trump that wants to ramp down, but to pivot and be more protective, have a protective stance for the first island chains. That's what's shifting here with Biden.
Well, I just want to say, we proved beyond a shadow of a doubt. Okay, everyone doubted me about the Biden Blackberries. Everyone said, that wasn't a Blackberry associated with Biden. You can read Blackberries Matter if you want the whole story. Okay, it's $4. But we showed,
and the links are in the description.
Oh, thank you. We showed unequivocally that these were Belt and Road Blackberries. This is Warren Buffett's investment. This is through Russia, through Rosneft, through an interpreter by the name of Carter Page. 10% of the Belt and Road, a $20 trillion deal, is Warren Buffett's nut in this thing. Okay, this Belt and Road, Bob Ulinsky, you saw him up there in front of the debate with Hunter Biden's Blackberry, saying, "Here's the messages," right? Who is he representing? Chairman Yi, the guy who was running the CEFC, the guy who was running Belt and Road. The reason why they're all lovey-dovey with China is because they want their 20 trillion. They want their $1 trillion nut in the deal, right? We know that's what it is. We know it's Belt and Road now. All doubt has been removed by Bob Ulinsky, what I was saying about the China-Russia deal across Central Asia.
And I think his family's still under Navy SEAL protection. He hired like a Navy SEAL team to protect his family. And so that's why he kind of felt secure enough to come out. But I mean, it seems like he's got, I don't know, regardless of his intentions, I think the effect is very good. And it vindicated George. And that's why we were very celebratory the other week when we were back in Michigan. But there was a couple dark days there for George when he thought the coup was totally complete before all the affidavits came out, and we had to just kind of give George some space. The affidavits came out, and then he was back to
which affidavits?
The Michigan affidavits. Remember you were
yeah.
And he was like, "No, the coup is complete."
No, I was really waiting to see we were begging people. We were in Michigan. We were begging people to come forward. Addy went up there to the TCF like 3 days, and he lived up there. And we were begging people to come forward. And we saw all these social media saying, Warren Flood, the red Ferrari, 3:45 a.m. They brought in 138,000 votes. Warren Flood, red Ferrari. And so where are these people now? Right? So we were bitching, for about 5 days. And then finally the lawsuit came out where the affidavits were in there. There was about 3 dozen in the Grand Rapids Justice Center's thing. And then the complaint to the city of Detroit was like 297. So I was like, okay, well, we got some motion now in the ocean. I'm happy now, but I was bitching because there was nobody. taking this to the next level legally. So,
No,
so
I felt I felt the same thing that you felt at that time. I mean, I just like, yeah, I was taking it a little differently. I was taking it, screw the affidavit, where's the war? You know,
Oh, right.
I wanted people protesting and raising hell. I think it's getting to that point where people need to really get engaged. But I understand that maybe the more prudent way to handle this is, the affidavit route. But they may not necessarily be mutually exclusive.
But Paul,
You know?
let me just ask you this question. Yes, they may not be mutually exclusive. Well, ballots or whatever, lawsuits before bullets, right? Ballots before bullets is the old saying. But I look at it and say, look, in the most important election in 2020, probably in our country's history, maybe save Lincoln's reelection, right? Here we have 51 programmers from Belgrade, Yugoslavia, the old Yugoslavia, Belgrade, Serbia, that have been a part of election operation flipping for the CIA for 20 years. And they just happen to be the people providing the oversampling algorithm that did all the jimmying of the votes, right? In the 5 key counties and the 5 key swing states. Don't you find that a little coincidental? Don't you find that all the voting counting stopped at 3:45 a.m. in all 5 of those states, or 3:42, and then it restarted at 3:45? Don't you find that a little coincidental?
And that's why I'm wondering, is Sydney's lawsuit and Giuliani's lawsuit going to be not only looking at affidavits, all right, and individuals saying they saw fraud, but or been instructed to do fraud, but is she really going to bring in the statistical analysis and the forensics that the IT forensics that show this? See, it almost seems like it's all leveraged on, did you see fraud? But I think this is so massive, you need to do forensics, and it's almost like we're running out of time. There's like statistical forensics that could be done to prove this.
Yeah, combining it all is going to be important. I think you're right, Paul. Not, just relying on witness statements and affidavits, I don't think is enough. Even if they are independently corroborated, that's, it's important to have that technical and statistical supporting evidence as well. Even just, we mentioned this before with the anomalies of the standard deviations, the fact that Trump was winning, Ohio being won by Trump handily, which we called. Our intelligence was correct. I think 2 weeks before the election, we called that, and we were right about that. So, yeah, I think putting it all together is going to be really important. I saw this video though. This he seemed like a young dude. He just analyzed, I think it was Pennsylvania's voting, and he just downloaded the data set off the government website, and he could see all, like, I think it was 7,000 votes that were supposedly sent out and received in the same day by the government. So, people are waking up to this. And
I mean, the probability of some of these things is so astronomical that you have a better chance of getting hit by an asteroid from Nibiru, than this really happening. I mean, that's what I'm saying is that this is where the statisticians need to come in and say, time out. This is no way a legit election, but I don't see Sidney Powell having unless she doesn't want to bring it up, but she's really doing it behind the scenes. It doesn't seem like they know what they're doing.
I'm gonna channel my Detroit Dave here, my skeptic in me. I don't trust Sidney Powell. I don't trust any of them. I know people kind of see Sidney Powell as a savior. I have good feelings about her, and I'm hopeful, but I don't know. I mean, I just don't know.
You said this with Jeffrey Prather in your interview the other night, Paul. You said, why isn't she talking about Belgrade? And, I see the forensic specialist Sydney's working with, a guy named Ramsland. We watched him last night again. talking about all the holes in the Dominion system, the malware that was in the Dominion system, the credential scraping software that you could actually scrape the credentials of all the county and election officials and change votes at the county level, as well as remotely from Europe. But he keeps talking about Seidel, and that bugs me, because Seidel was in 28 different elections, but we didn't go to Detroit this time of year because we love the weather in Detroit this time of year. We went to Detroit, and you know Detroit, and you know where Wayne State is. We didn't go to Wayne State because of the luxury accommodations down there at Wayne State. We went there because we said Warren Flood's there. And Warren Flood had a front position with Microsoft, and they relocated him to Detroit. We said, this is going to be the center of operations. So that's why we're watching Warren Flood, and because he was the center of operations in 2016. And the reason why why a Strzok has to farm this out, if you're FBI, you can't just launch these things internally inside the United States, right? Christopher Wray can't just launch an election operation in the United States. You need to get a NATO partner. And then the NATO partner then sees it as an investigation. You have the NATO partner investigate the hackers from Belgrade. Then you can have an excuse to put Warren Flood, a Canadian intelligence operative, into Detroit, right? So this is what's going on, and we're waiting. We finally stayed up how late that night? I think till about 3. I had to get up on a plane to go to the next day. We slept about an hour, and then immediately, as soon as we went to bed, as soon as we heard the polls were closed down there, we went to bed, because we figured, hey, they can't do anything else. Well, what do they do? The red Ferrari comes in, and then we see the little red wagon going in, showing the door is open. There's no security. And then what happens next? Here comes the red Ferrari, and here comes the big white van with 138,000 votes. So, and it looks like that happened simultaneously with about that many votes in all of the 5 key counties. We identified a warehouse. We went to Toledo. We went to the warehouse right by the airport where we thought the votes were being kept, the backup votes. Because what you had to do is you had to keep the votes close enough. You had to keep the spread close enough so that if you brought in 150,000, which is pushing the edge of envelope of believability that they all could be for Biden. But you could say, well, you know, he's Biden's strong in mostly black communities. You have to keep the vote within 150,000. They only had 750,000 votes printed with the barcodes. So you have to make sure that when it gets to 342, that you're within the 150,000 to flip it. So it was a combination. It was a 1-2 punch. The smoke kept it within like 70,000. And then the 150 put Biden over by about a margin of 70,000 in most of the states. It's less than that in Wisconsin. It's less than that in Georgia. Yeah, and there was a shooting yesterday or 2 days ago in Wisconsin. Which,
yeah, I heard about that.
I don't know if that's, immediately I was like, oh, false flag, but I haven't looked into it too deeply.
Where was that at?
That was in Milwaukee at a mall.
Yeah.
So, very close to, Kenosha is actually pretty close to Milwaukee. It's in the southeastern part of the state. Rittenhouse was also just posted bail as well. Oh, yeah. They announced these things. Anytime you see a shooting, or like when Addy was down there, literally somebody drove a car through a donut shop right in front of Addy. Yeah. Now, do you think that was to distract people away from the TCF Center? Because Addy has film of it. They drove a car through a donut shop. Now, that is diversion 101. Yeah, I was thanking my subscribers. I was like, thank you guys. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Caroline. And I was like, oh, there's cops here. Why is there cops here? I stopped streaming. And I go around the corner where our friend was waiting for me to join him for lunch. And there was just glass everywhere. And the cars inside the donut shop. I mean, this is like Peter Strzok diversion 101, shooting at a mall. Everyone has gone to the mall, right? So that's something that everybody's going to look at. That's the thing, though, is like we're getting to the point now where it's like a shooting happens and nobody's going to believe it. It's like nobody's going to buy it unless it's like, show me the bodies. show me the videos of the bullets going into them and show me the blood. And you know, we're at that point now where it's like, you can't believe anything these institutions are telling
Well,
us.
you know, but yeah, the thing is that you're right. There's almost like, I'll call it that our Alex Jones gene has been expressed. So everything's a false flag. You know, so
Some
but,
epigenetics a la Alex Jones.
Well, here's my explanation always. I didn't drive the car into the donut shop. Wasn't me that drove the car into the donut shop.
you know, but with your IT expertise, George, Chris last night, we did another filming last night,
Chris
and
Hunter?
Chris showed on the screen for the viewers Cloudflare and Microsoft being a part of Dominion this whole process pipeline. Now, why would Microsoft and Outlook be tied to Dominion? I mean, I don't understand why this isn't like closed circuit. Why are they using all these third-party platforms that could easily be hacked, unless they want it hacked?
So I'm familiar. Dmitry Alperovich, I think, was at Cloudflare for a while. I'll let you bring up the graphics. But if you do like a Microsoft SharePoint application, let's say you've got a SharePoint application where you've got vote totals coming in from 3,000 different counties. And you wrote an app, it's a spreadsheet, right? And you're like, you have the first column, there's Cloudflare, which is, and I also saw they had a Barracuda, which is an email and firewall software. I looked at all their IP addresses. There's Cloudflare. I'm pretty sure Dmitry, can you do a look up on Dmitry Alperovich and Cloudflare? I know he was at FireEye, but then I thought he went over to Cloudflare as well. But anyway, if you're working on a hacking operation, right? I have to have real-time communication. Let's just say you're in Belgrade. I got to have real-time communication with you. So not only do I see the vote totals coming in from the different machines, and remember, I'm only going to do operations in swing states. I'm only going to do key counties. So it's not like we're having to do all the counties in America. All we need is running vote totals for the total of each state. And then we have to trim in counties along the way to make sure that we get within our 70,000 votes. It looks like what the target was 70,000, that Trump would be up at 342. And then the flip would be another 138,000, 150,000 votes. But anyway, I have to have one column, which is the real vote total. Then I have to communicate to you, if you're at Smote, if you're Alec Lazar, I have to communicate to you how much to crank it back to make it believable. Because I'm listening to the press, I'm listening to CNN and so forth. So I send you a number. I put a number in a spreadsheet, on a Microsoft Office spreadsheet, in a SharePoint document. And then you go, okay. And then you go into Smote and do the oversample and correct it down. Now it comes into 342. Now we go, okay, shut it down. Okay, shut them all down. Because now we need to say everything's closed. We need to close simultaneously because that has to be synchronized. And now I need to get my ballots from the Toledo warehouse, Dan Gilbert's Toledo warehouse. I need to put planes in the air. And I have 750,000 votes. Okay. I got to get them to a municipal airport. We don't know exactly where that municipal airport was around but we believe it was Novi, but it could be somewhere else around the Detroit area. But then I got to get a Ferrari because I need to tell the police, clear the way for the Ferrari. If I say clear the way for a gray Nova, that could be any car, but a red Ferrari is pretty distinctive. You know, Dan Gilbert's coming in with his girlfriend. He wants to, you know, I don't know, Gilbert, let's just say, what's it, Illich, his son, is coming in with his girlfriend. He wants to show him Cobo Hall. Okay, great. Meet him at the airport. The executive jet lands. Everybody says, hey, well, that is Illich. Oh, he is bringing the votes in. Okay, great. Open the door. And then they all come in. We think something similar to this happened in the 4 other counties, not just Detroit. So you got something else on Cloudflare?
So there's a article that came out on the 2nd of November, just before the election, on Fortune, where Alperovich talks a bit about the 2016 election, and they're just saying that the election 2020 cybersecurity is strong, according to the government. No direct results, though, on Alperovich and Cloudflare. And then, of course, the 2014, Sony hack article came up too. So
you go there, and let me look at one thing. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, some of the IP addresses that he was showing me, Chris was showing me last night, it involved Google, Cloudflare, Microsoft, and I just was like going, if we're going to have voter integrity, if the system needs to be not using all this third party back end, door type stuff, and that it should be all closed circuit. I mean, I sure as hell hope that our nuclear weapons aren't running on Microsoft Office.
Oh, no. I know all about this because my brother was an expert in this. And they been two acquisitions. And if you go around Washington, D.C. on the metro, there's all these ads for how all this stuff was put in the cloud. And Microsoft did win the contract for virtualizing a lot of the Pentagon's information. And then there was 2 other vendors that also won. I want to say Raytheon won as well through their subsidiary. Let me look at the contract again.
Raytheon has an office in the outskirts of Cambridge.
Oh, that's their headquarters.
Oh, yeah. That's where their headquarters. I didn't know if it was their headquarters.
That's Peter Strzok. That's where Peter Strzok, his first days as an office boy, started, was in Raytheon.
Really?
Grab this a second. Cloudflare does security. Okay, so, but you can basically see if anybody's watching you. Basically, you see if anybody is hacking you, if there's what they call a man-in-the-middle attack, or if somebody's listening as a man-in-the-middle. But let me get the contract for you. I actually talked to the Microsoft rep in Washington. I used to talk to him a lot. Task Force and I used to talk to him a lot. He got a huge contract. So give me a second.
So Guatemalans set their parliament on fire yesterday, Paul. I don't know if you saw that.
Maybe we should set our parliament on fire.
Yeah, well, it's not off the table, is it? But
is that to divert us away from our elections and the parliament that should have been set on fire?
Yeah, and George, of course, thinks it's CIA. But I just thought that was, quite a development, setting your own parliament on fire there in Guatemala. So, it's just worldwide. This dissatisfaction and
What's your take on Nigel Farage? And he mentions that Brexit is cracking, meaning that the momentum of Brexit is starting to falter, and that Bojo is aligning himself with the EU again.
Oh, Nigel Farage said that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this just happened right after Biden was presumed the president-elect. So these globalists are getting hubris, and they're thinking that they're going to be able to reconstitute some of the things that they lost during the years of Trump.
Yeah, I gotta say, Paul, I've been in our country's bubble the last month to 6 weeks, so I haven't been up on global politics as much as I usually am, particularly in England. But if that's true, that's a huge development because of the fact that a majority of Englanders, it seemed, were pro-Brexit, and supposedly, as a Tory, Johnson should have been the party guy to lead them to get that done. But the fact that he's a Tory and he's backing off on this, and the timing of it too with Biden, it just shows the collusion. I think the globalism.
You got it. They're making this big move. They're
So
making their
George
globalist
wants
move.
to share something.
Yeah, sorry about that. You hold this here.
Okay.
So it's called the JEDI contract. It's the Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure Contract. It's a $10 billion contract. This is New York Times. And Amazon was fighting it. And this is why Amazon was in on it. And then there was a Raytheon One subsidiary that was in on it as well, because different people had virtualized or put stuff into the cloud for the DoD. But this was the general backbone, which is Microsoft. You can see why having Warren Flood as a NATO operative inside of the Pentagon, inside Microsoft, as a professional services contact for NATO, it's kind of handy right around election time. Because remember all these things, right? All these things need communications. If we're going to run an operation, we need to communicate, right? Either verbally or smoke signals or some way, okay? Any type of conspiracy requires on communications. That's why we've always focused on the communications. If you use any kind of electronic device which creates a signal, you've just created a nice waveform for the NSA. No matter what you turn on, even any kind of cell phone, you create a nice waveform. The only way that these operations could go on after all the warning and all the trouble we had in 2016 is if they're encrypted communications and they're military grade encryption. Military grade encryption means the other side can't see it. That's the only way this is possible. The only possible person who could provide that level of encryption is somebody in the FBI, somebody who knows what they can break and what they can't break. And that's Peter Strzok, right? And that's that group, and this Brennan and Clapper and Hayden and, the whole crew, right? I mean, it's not just Peter Strzok, but he's the kind of the face man for it. So that's why I've always concentrated on these BlackBerries, because if you look, Warren, look at Peter Strzok involved with Hillary's emails. You're going to find out, especially after you read Addy and Iyer's book, that the Clinton emails aren't really Hillary Clinton emails. They're military grade encryption NATO BlackBerry emails that piled up 650,000 emails. They're emails from people that Peter Strzok gave these encrypted devices to for each operation they ran, each overthrow they ran, right? They were all piled up under and put in Hillary's bathroom to make it seem like bad Hillary. But in actual fact, it leads to a much bigger conspiracy of David Petraeus, Henry Kissinger, KKNR, because these people have state sponsorship. These people have state sponsorship. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to get in to bringing in 51 Siberian hackers, right? They're not really Siberians, because they're the people who threw out the Siberian, Serbian. You wouldn't have 50 Serbian people from Belgrade writing our code. There's no way, no how anyone in the DoD ever would sign off on anything like that for a military operation.
Yeah, and even just talking to populists too, like you'd be hard pressed to find someone, I think, that is an American and wants or thinks it's a good idea for our votes to just bypass to another country one way or another. It's just a total security, basic security, national security.
It's two birds with one stone approach. These people that are orchestrating this create havoc. The first bird is create havoc with the election. So everyone's focused on Trump fighting that election while these globalists are making their move, while no one's paying attention to the global play, like what President Xi's talking about, what Bojo's talking about, what is going on with, let's say, NATO and all this stuff. All right, that's the first bird. The second bird is literally, the heart and soul of the United States and who's going to be the next president. All right, but it's very similar to how I approach the problem with the bioweapon. It's not just the scientific. You got to look at the whole mosaic, the financial and the civil liberties and all this. So what's going on with the election, we have to look at the mosaic. And this mosaic is screaming, they are trying to retake ground that they lost, meaning the globalists, during the 4 years of Trump. And they're going to speed through to try to play catch up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I'm seeing geopolitically, you know, what's going
It's
on.
almost like it was just a pause too, just because of a constant coup, basically. There was just one after another, to the point where, you know, Trump could not get a whole lot done, right?
Mhm.
But
well, I think this election is a coup that's going on. I think Trump
oh, yeah.
won. I think Trump won, and that this whole system, this whole computerized system, and all the fraud that was going on with the mail-in ballots, it's a coup with a thinly veiled, disguised as an election. You know,
Yeah.
and this is a coup that's
a
happening.
good description.
Yeah, you know, so let's pivot to some of the stuff that we were talking about, if you don't mind, before we started recording. So for the ones that are that have seen the videos, there's 2 videos that came into my possession last night that I posted, and they were weird videos. All right, it kind of like, I don't know, odd, like something you would see on 4chan, you know, or type stuff. But it was, one video had the music of Poker Face from Lady Gaga, and there was these switching back and forth between, let's say, main characters. So Lady Gaga is in her video in a few seconds, and then it would switch to some guy named Aleppo. All right, I don't know who this guy is, but he's dancing around. All right, and then it goes to you, George. All right, and there's many clips where you're by a submarine, and
Yes.
like a boat, like a military boat, something like a PT 109 type boat.
Yeah.
And you have a black t-shirt on, and you have your glasses on. Okay, all right. But then there's one scene where you're actually with the selfie stick, and you have the water behind you, you know. So, and then it goes to some guy named DeFango. And then it goes to Farmer Jones. Farmer Jones is in this. And then it goes to McDuff, while the only picture of McDuff is while he's playing the fiddle. So I don't know what the hell this means. All right. But this is really, really odd. And then the next video is this Stinky Jobs, or not Sticky Jobs video, where I think it's your brother, and he's talking about friend or foe, friend or foe, friend or foe, friend or foe. And and it's a bunch of tanks in the background, and he's talking about, are we dealing with Germans? Are we dealing with, who are we dealing with? It's kind of funny, actually. And then there's like this big pack of paper that's in like a USPS package, and he slaps it down on like a bench, and it's like a camouflage bench, and and he said, this is the sticky bomb. All right. So I don't know what the hell this means, but I don't even know why it came into my possession.
Let me give you in reverse order. I can tell you, I think, who created both of those. The second one, let's do the second one first. I think was created by my brother. He's involved in a lawsuit with Jason Goodman of Crowdsource the Truth. In his allegation, this is not my allegations, but he says that Jason Goodman and several of his guests repeatedly, I think it's 10 or 12 episodes, said that he had hacked what's called the Federal Bridge. The Federal Bridge is a electronic clearinghouse that's a secure, highly secure clearinghouse for federal communications. Okay. And his guests, Jason and guests, agreed that Dave had dropped the defenses of the Navy Intelligence Center at the Pentagon, as well as other key nerve centers before 9/11, which allowed the 9/11 attacks to occur. Okay. Which my brother's odds of doing that before the 9/11 attacks is about the same odds as 51 programmers from Belgrade, Serbia. You know, about the odds of Joe Biden winning legitimately. Okay. The much better chance, it was the same 51 programmers from Belgrade starting in 1999 with encrypted devices. There's a company called P-Tech. We've talked about this a long time, that were given encrypted devices in 1999. They were in the building in 2001. They were going from floor to floor to floor, interviewing everyone, all these different traders. Okay. And getting contracts to suck all the data out of all their systems, all their customers. Why would you do that before you would collapse a building? Because you wanted all their customers after the collapse occurred? You were in trading, Paul. You know how valuable trading customers are, these big institutions.
It's all about the client book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? That's what P-Tech was doing. Okay. So rather than, and I'm not going to editorialize on it, I'm just saying that anybody who's ever been on Wall Street like you were, and you made a lot of money on Wall Street for a lot of people, Paul, you know the value of the book. You know that P-Tech was probably sucking those names out before the collapse, right? And it was probably not my brother. So the reason why that lawsuit's hitting the bench there, David loves camouflage, because he got shot down in Nicaragua and spent some time in jail and at prison, a Nicaraguan prison. So he always throws everything in there. He always throws a little drama in there, but he's basically saying, I didn't do it. The P-Tech guys did it. And they're in a part of their, I know Jason's made up fanciful things about you being involved with Lieber at Harvard.
Right.
So this isn't new. And this is all going to be adjudicated in court. And right what the stage they're at now is discovery. And part of discovery is called interrogatories. And Dave is asking a set of questions of Jason. And that's about the 25th question. Explain to me how you can prove that I hacked the Federal Bridge. So that's what that video is about.
But why did it come to my possession?
Because
I don't get it.
Well,
I mean, I have nothing to do with this.
But the person knows that we're in communication. They know Addy's in communication with you. They know Jeff Prather's in communication with you. What they're trying to do is create doubt between us about me, about others.
Well, I mean, I don't have any doubt. I mean, I go from the gut, and I've always believed that, I can trust, the people that I'm associating with, and I'm going to stick with the people I trust.
It's
and what's interesting, Selfie Stick, he did a video recently complaining about you and your brother. He's outside of New York, and he's out in the cold, and he's saying, I'm walking to the courthouse right now. I mean, he makes it he's such a little.
Is that your nickname for him? You call him Selfie Stick, Paul?
Selfie Stick is his nickname. I just he's such a little whiner.
One good thing about him walking around is that people are interested in the condition of New York City. And so you can see a lot of scenery behind him. So if you turn down the volume, it's probably one of the better walk-arounds.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree that, he's doing a good service and showing everyone, what's really going on in New York City during this crisis. That's a good thing. The problem is that his attitude and his demeanor and there must be a reason why he's been divorced twice.
I noticed he made a crack about somebody getting a divorce. Oh yeah, Cuomo divorcing a Kennedy, and he goes, I can see why he got divorced. And then I said, Jason, you just opened yourself up, dude.
Right. I mean, it's just I can't. Can you imagine this guy? I mean, just his attitude with everybody. He's not. I don't view him as a team player at all.
No.
At all. No. At all. And it's all about him. And what surprises me is that he's been able to have a decent relationship with that Ortel. I don't know him, but I mean, you know, it seems like he has a decent relationship with him. I'm surprised. I mean, Ortel seems to be pretty smart, right?
Yeah, he is.
He's a Yale, you know, type, and you know, he's a good investigative journalist. He's kind of focused on the Clinton, you know, corruption stuff. But I'm just surprised that he doesn't see through Jason Goodman's, you know, negative side.
You know,
I never really figured out there. There's some weird thing going on there.
Charles is incredible. I love Charles. And Jason knows that he needs one person he treats decently. Otherwise, if he loses Charles, that's it. There goes the franchise. That's like losing Michael.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah. It's over. Not that he doesn't do a good job getting an interview here and there, but he gets them because of Charles. Charles is working his back channels. Charles has all the contacts through book writing. So Charles knows everybody through their agents, and it's easy to get an interview with somebody through their book agent.
Yeah, but why is he using Jason as the conduit? He could use so many better people out there.
Because Charles lives down there in Chelsea, and he can just walk over to Jason's, and Jason, you know, it does a really good job with the production. And the one time Jason does shut up and not interrupt people is with Charles. So it turns, and he even interrupts Charles though, and you can see Charles getting frustrated. Because like Jason will see a cat and goes, "Oh, there goes a cat. What could that mean?" And you know, there's a burger in the street. What did that mean? Did Ghislaine Maxwell leave that burger there too? Look how perfectly the burger is.
Well, I mean, there was this one time, you know, not to make this episode a Jason Goodman episode, but you know, there was this one time where he's walking down the street, and there's these people that are unloading packages. You know, in New York, a lot of things are delivered. So he makes it sound like this is like a big conspiracy from Amazon.
I saw that.
Like,
the black girl.
What the hell, dude? It's just a bunch of dudes unloading a truck.
There was a black girl, and she had a face mask on. He goes, "What are you doing? Why are you following us?" And she goes, "I'm delivering a package." Right to there.
No, I mean, is he really that kind of like superstitious or paranoid?
Individuals do not survive during wartime.
Wait, say that again?
Individuals do not survive during wartime.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, it's about
you know what?
Effort. It's about team effort.
Addy doesn't mean anything by that. He means that's who are you quoting there?
That's Navy SEALs, I think. But my point is, you gotta have a strong team. You gotta be a team guy.
Right. Thank you, because Jason will turn that around as a threat from Addy Adds.
No.
Right. You know. Guy. Yeah.
Oh, so, yeah. Because right. Because you know, Selfie Stick is going to say, "Did he just threaten me?"
Yeah. I mean, everything's about him.
No. Jason, you're just an idiot.
Last night he said he was talking about the Academy Awards, and they have people that do what they call brand protection, right? So if you use their little Emmy thing, I think it's like a nymph holding up a globe or something. I don't know what it is.
Cuomo won an Emmy.
And he was all about Cuomo winning this Emmy, which I agree, it's ridiculous. But anyway, they had somebody send him a letter and then file a lawsuit saying you can't use, I can't remember what Jason put on the Emmy, but he did some kind of doctoring of the image of the Emmy, right? And they sent him a letter, cease and desist. He went ahead, and so then they sent him a lawsuit. So he literally last night said that I think they gave Cuomo the letter to troll me.
See, you notice that it's like he is the sun and everything revolves around him. He's the heliosphere, you know?
Heliocentric universe. Adjacent-centric. I mean, he literally said that. Do you remember? Did you see that?
I walked out of the room.
I mean, it's entertainment like you can't believe, because you kind of are watching a Truman Show where this person really does believe that they're the center of the universe. And it really is fun to watch sometimes.
I'll tell you, it would be so funny. It would be so funny while he's doing a live, you know, one of these live sessions, you know, outside, just to like go out and like follow him.
Yeah. Oh no,
Just follow.
we're stalking him. We're stalking him. You know, threatening his safety. You
No,
know?
I'm going to get a Big Mac and fries.
You know what somebody should do?
I can't find the McDonald's that I want.
Now here's how you could really troll Jason: is you could find out when he's going to go out, and then go to In-N-Out Burger and buy 10 In-N-Out burgers, and perfectly wrap them and put them in the middle of the street at 150-yard intervals, and he would flip out. That would send him into a Ghislaine Maxwell frenzy that he would never come out of. It would be so great.
That's hilarious. That is hilarious. No, but you know, it makes you wonder, like some of these people, you know, like Jason, you know, are they? It doesn't even seem like they want to help the country. It's all about them,
Right?
and, you know, and what we're doing, it's like, no, it's like we're trying to dig, you know, up some, you know, juicy detail to prove that there's this voter fraud that may end up stealing the presidency.
You know,
It's sad that not everyone's working together and moving in the right direction.
We can't all have the same opinions, right? I mean, some people lean toward Q, I lean toward the W. You know, we all have our, you know, ways of thinking. I mean, I tend to think everything was done on a BlackBerry until this last election. But there's probably other phones with other encryption schemes like Green Zone phones and Android. You know, people are going to disagree about the small things, right? But the big stuff, who the deep state is, Brennan and Clapper and Hayden and all their minions, Strzok. I don't think we should have any disagreement about that. It shouldn't be 51 programmers from Belgrade in our 5 most key counties in our 5 swing states. That can't happen. No one's watching. And this is why I say with Sidney Powell, they keep going to Seidel. But Seidel wasn't involved. They were involved in 28 states, but it wasn't the states where Dominion was. They're competitors. So I get worried that they're on the wrong track. That's all I was
agree
going to
with
say.
you. I mean, I've been concerned when I was listening to that news conference by Giuliani and Sidney. I'm like going, you're not saying like what I know, you know, and it's the Belgrade connection. And it's like, I'm just shocked and she's not, you know, and I don't know if it's because that's the ace up her sleeve, or she just doesn't know, or if she's compromised and can't reveal it because it's tied to the CIA and she's afraid of her life. I don't know. I don't know what the reason is, but I think there's more evidence from what we've uncovered. And I'm assuming that she would have better information than we, that, you know, the information that we have is pointing directly to Serbia and not to Venezuela.
Well, let me
just like, I don't, you know, so I'm just like, this Venezuelan thing is like, God.
An example of how this kind of cooperative thing happens is you post a thing with Chris Hunter and you say, here's the IP address, and you put out the 4 documents, and then Addy's with me, and we immediately stop the car. We pull the car over, you know, and immediately say, oh, here's what I know about that, right? In North Carolina, right? Or that was before you got here. I was with somebody else. Sorry. But anyway, but like you said, the thing about the Cloudflare and the Microsoft, it reminded me of Jedi and work with a Microsoft guy in Washington. And then it's like a stone soup. We all throw in and we are all going to boil it up and we're going to find the answer, right? I think the Cloudflare, I thought of the DNS. DNS is the way computers connect to each other through like the domain name, Dominion voting. And Cloudflare allows you to go around the Google's DNS, which would put it out on the public internet. You could create what's a virtual private cloud with Cloudflare, I believe. And that allows you to encrypt your traffic between Belgrade and Warren Flood in Detroit. So right there, it's not proof, but it's a little bit more weight on the scale of, hey, we got played. This thing was an election flip operation. So that's why I hate when other channels, especially ones with 118,000 subscribers, go attack the other people. And we have a good laugh, but you know, I like Charles' show with Jason. Charles is great. And I think we need this cooperative thing. And that's why we're trying to establish these centers around the United States in our network, in the Neighborhood News Network, because we want to be able to say, if you want to go to South Carolina to sell your books, if you're coming up from Florida, we have a place for you. If you want to go to Michigan, we got a place for you. If you want to go to LA, and now we're building out Denver. We're talking to Atlanta. So we're trying to make it easier for people who are writing books and on the lecture circuit and YouTube creators to have kind of a ready-made network that they can go out and add their value.
Makes sense to me. I mean, I like the idea.
Addy's the guy who has to run around and do all this.
Well, just adding to the stone soup metaphor, it's intelligence is analyzed information, as we were talking about. As Major Prather was talking about as well. So just, you know, making sure that the information we're going over and sifting through can be helpful, I think is the key point. It's not just about sharing information. It's sharing analyzed and
you know, what's interesting, you know, through this crisis, all right, you know, we have the Bannon war room, right? You know, I have my war room thing. You know, you guys have this neighborhood news hour.
Let me roll my eyes first, Paul.
Okay, no. But the thing is, the point that I'm making here is that it's not just, it is now going beyond the citizen journalist YouTube channel.
the public.
What we're starting to see here is the beginnings of an intelligence organization.
Yep.
The citizen version of the CIA.
Yep.
What you guys are building is the citizen version of the CIA.
Yeah. And you're our New York agent. You don't know it yet. Well, maybe you do know it.
I know it. I know.
We're handling you. We're handling you, Paul.
No, but it should be a cooperative thing like that. It
Right.
should be a thing where you don't have to sign any contracts.
Right.
You just come on to the show, we come on to your show, etc., and we all share information. That is an intelligence network. It doesn't have to be a formal thing,
Right.
and people are going to be wrong. You know, it could be that they used the Green Zone phones for this operation. They didn't use the BlackBerries.
You know,
The reason,
the beauty of what's going on here is that you can see in real time, just in this episode, but many different episodes on my program, on your programs, you know, the beauty is that you can see the real time brainstorming
right?
and how it's snapping in the pieces of this mosaic. All right, to see the picture, the big picture of things. We have done more just with the resources that we have, you know, the limited resources that we have, than anything that mainstream media has done. And they have millions of dollars of resources.
Right.
And the you know, when people talk about mainstream media, what you're really talking about is these intelligence agencies. You know, it's not so much CNN or Fox. It's the FBI. It's CIA. It's, you know, it's Mockingbird. It's not. You know, they brand themselves as Fox and MSNBC and stuff, but they really are just intelligence.
This is how I see it, George, and you'll like this analogy. So the CIA, FBI, the Smith Modernization Act, the sound piece is mainstream media, okay? But the analogy I want to use is that they're kind of like a virus, all right? They're kind of like a virus.
That's a good start.
And they're getting into, and let's say Joe Public is the human body, and they're a virus, and they're trying to infect Joe Public to think a certain way, to do, you know, and we are kind of like the immune system going, foul, no, yeah, election fraud, you know, bioweapon, you know. So we're kind of like the immune system for Joe Public, all right?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot because you can tell we're talking to a prospective doctor with PhD and other stuff. Yeah, I very much think that the red flag type analysis. This is why this is why your question to Jeffrey Prather is such a great litmus test. And this is my same test, which is why aren't you talking about Belgrade? You're talking about Hugo Chavez, a guy who I think is dead, right? You're talking about an election that happened in 2005. Why? Why aren't you talking about what happened the election evening in Wayne County, right? Where you went to school, where you know exactly where Addy went, spent 3 nights. And this is a great scene. Comparing the media versus the other one. Addy goes up. The first night is really kind of scary, right? Because there was more of them than there was of us, right? And then all these Antifa guys and these Channel 7 guys are hiding in the van. And Addy goes up and he knocks on the window. Hey guys, it's okay. You can come out. That was so classic.
Yeah, there's a couple guys in there, and there was, it's not. It seems like they're showing up because they have to, kind of thing. It's not. They're showing up because they want to find out what's going on. It's, it's almost like especially among our sphere, it's bad to be part of the mainstream media. Like nobody trusts you if you are part of the establishment, even if you are just the lowest rung on the ladder or lowest on the totem pole.
But these guys were drinking hot chocolate, and as soon as Addy knocked on the door, it was like he had taken a crowbar and smashed the window. They shit their pants. They spilled their coffee. You could see it. They literally were scared out of their mind when he hit knock, knock, knock. Are you guys okay? And to me, that was the perfect moment to describe what we do and the guts we have versus mainstream media, which is they have one guy with the engine running. We're going to be down there near Wayne State. Oh, shit. There's going to be Antifa. We're scared out of our mind. No, we're not going to take chances. We've been threatened by Antifa before. I think it's actually a guy named Ken Hale out of Norfolk. And, if you find me in an alley, it's going to be NATO in Norfolk. It's not going to be Antifa. But anyway, that's what I'm scared of. I'm not scared of Antifa. I'm scared of the murder that's covered with Antifa guys, right? And so I look behind all this stuff and I say, look, it's us or them. We either build out this public intelligence network, or I guess I'd call it CIA, Citizens Intelligence Agency, or we die, and we live with their boot on our neck for the rest of our lives. Yeah.
Even if it's not overt, that's a big factor that came into my decision. It's like hiding in plain sight, right? It's like, Paul, you just saw me with George today. Right. So you have verification that I'm here with George. If I disappear, all of a sudden everyone's going to be like, well, where did Ads go? He was just with George in South Carolina. So it provides, I think, a sense of public protection that I think most people don't see because they're trying to be very private, and that's understandable. Not everybody has to show their face or anything like that, but these guys, they can find out anything they want about you anyways. Right. So you may as well, show some of your cards. It's the best defense. It's counterintuitive.
It is counterintuitive. And I totally agree with that. Like, Paul, you did it early on with this bioweapon thing. You got showered with all these trolls. So did we. And even one thing I do give Jason credit for is he at least has some guts. He at least goes into some places that are dicey. Like, we went into all the Awan spy ring houses. I had my partner go in there. She's dead 2 years ago. But I mean, one of the things is I think we have a lot more courage. I knocked on a PAC ISI murderer, his house, in Woodbridge, Virginia. That's what it's going to take. I mean, really, like you said, it's a call to arms, but the arms in this case are cell phones and selfie sticks. We had to get selfie sticks too because nobody likes a jittery camera. But I hate to say it, but that's the new battle gear. We bought like 8 of them. We're gonna send you one, Paul. Did we ever send Paul one?
Oh yeah, I think we get sent.
You know, I should do a show where I have a selfie stick and I'm walking around New York looking for a selfie stick.
Yeah. Well, then he'll say
we'll do it when I come to New York, Paul. We'll walk around. I will definitely do that when I come because I still
on the
want to
hunt for Jason. On the hunt for Jason.
Well, no comment, but I don't even know what are the lockdown restrictions there? Is one allowed to enter New York now? Because I think it changed again, didn't it?
Well, you're not supposed to travel outside or inside. In or out
so
New York.
It's like Escape from New York, that old game. Remember that game? So
and movie.
Yeah, we literally have it right now. So, and I heard New Jersey was the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
now, I haven't heard Connecticut shutting down, but New Jersey and New York are shutting down.
How about Delaware? Because the same company, remember that company that Bloomberg had? It was one of those spinoffs of EcoHealth Alliance. The Bloomberg had the guy was the public medical officer for the city of New York. Paul, you were covering that story. They had
I don't remember the name of it. I'd have to look it up again. I don't remember the name. Allied Health Alliance.
Allied Health Alliance. They were associated with EcoHealth Alliance.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, but you could just see where this whole thing was.
And these public intelligence agents, it's such a thorn in the side of this cabal, I think, because we're such a small group, right? The 3% we've talked about before. When you give a shout out to Harry the Greek in Ohio, who, as far as George can tell, and what we've talked about too with myself and Aaron back at the Swing State Studios, single-handedly prevented Buttigieg from getting the presidency, because if you guys remember, he was leading by miles ahead of everybody, and then all of a sudden he disappears, right? Do you remember that? And Kamala Harris was at like 3% or 2% or whatever it was. Buttigieg was just, he was kicking butt, so to speak. And and then Harry the Greek came out with, oh yeah, by the way, he's a CIA baby. He was born on a CIA base, Oconus, and that kind of did him in, and because nobody knew he was intelligence, but he was and is.
Yeah, and they started introducing him. It shows you how little backgrounding that MSM does, because I noticed some of the anchors would say, well, he was an intelligence officer during the Libyan war. He'd be like, that's not what you're supposed to say. You're supposed to say I'm a combat veteran. You're not supposed to say I sprayed people in Libya on my Eclipse plane. That's not good. But then he admitted it, so
we're going theoretical here. Doesn't he look a little bit like Peter Strzok? Or no? What do you think? Do you think Buttigieg looks a little bit like Peter Strzok?
And that's his father?
No, they're about the same age.
Well, there was this
the brothers.
Yeah, I don't think they're brothers, but I do think that there is kind of a I do believe they're both convinced their nobility. And as a CIA officer, your job is to make someone believe that they deserve something they don't have. So even if they have a red Ferrari and you're Warren Flood and you're living in Michigan, right, and you have 5 vacation homes, you're supposed to, as a CIA anthropologist, come up with, well, you don't realize this, but you're the actual descendant of the flood king of floods, and you actually own all of the Hudson Bay Company, old territory. You own everything from the St. Lawrence Seaway to Chicago, and that's been stolen from you, right? And that's the job of a CIA case officer, is to make you think that you've had something stolen from you, so you're willing to fight and kill to get it back.
They're doing this at the macro level too, with kind of the societal victim mentality. It just leads to rage and outrage, and all the good villain stories, they all start out like that. When you look at Walter White in Breaking Bad, for example, he is first a victim, right? And he thinks of himself as a victim, and then that starts the descent to the dark side. So it's really quite an ingenious tactic to use. So I do think they're doing it not only at the individual level with their assets, but at the macro level, particularly with the young people.
Yeah, and so when heroin is discovered, right, and I can't remember, it was in the late 1800s, and Bayer had heroin. They were, it used to be sold by Bob Muller's father, great grandfather, as a great grandfather, or maybe his grandfather. Anyway, I can't remember. I think it was his grandfather. It was a doctor, and he was an ear, nose, and throat guy, and they were giving it to kids for earaches. Okay, but then during the Roosevelt administration, it was banned. So what did they do? Did they say, well, I guess there goes a really super profitable business with these poppies? No, they said, hey, let's make it something that Royal Concessions. Let's make it something that, remember the old pirates of the Caribbean? They had Royal Concessions to pirate for the Queen, right? So there was these concessions that they would get, these commissions, that they were allowed to be pirates. We'll just take that and give them out for these different drug dealers. So after World War II, they gave them out to these families in Italy, and they called them Knights of Malta. Now, the Knights of Malta had been around, but they decided to use something that they were already sold on, that there was this sovereign military order for the Pope and the protectors of the Catholic religion.
Papacy.
The Papal States. These Papal States were stolen from you. Don't you realize, you as an Italian, you're not just an Italian, you're also a Catholic, and these Papal States have been stolen from you. So the Peter Strzok's of the world, devout Catholics, Pete Buttigieg, devout Catholics, they really believe this stuff. They really believe this, that we have to get the Papal States back for the Pope. We have to use mock viruses. We have to spray this stuff. We have to control the world with these chemical weapons, and because this is going to get the Papal States back to the Pope. And I'm not kidding you.
At the large level too, with the native population and how the Catholic Church basically committed genocide, which is still ongoing to an extent from the 20th century now. When you look at Kevin Annett's work, fantastic reverend who got defrocked because of it, which basically means he just lost his ability to preach. It's the same idea, you know, and there's this verse in, I think it's Deuteronomy, about you know, killing the non-believers basically, and taking their wives and you know, enslaving them really. And that's largely what has gone on with the native population and how the Catholic Church has treated them. And the Catholic Church is perhaps the biggest owner of real estate in the world when you think about it. It's quite,
well, I mean, the biggest part of the Archdiocese's portfolio is the real estate that they have in New York.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that because I mean, I work there and manage their portfolio.
I was going to say, be careful, dude. You signed a non-disclosure.
Yeah.
No. I mean, you know, but the thing is that, but you know, what's interesting about the 1011 is the building on First Ave, all right, and First Ave and 55th Street. And what's so interesting about that place is that we had Knights of Malta on I think it was the 14th floor.
You had Knights of Malta on the 14th floor?
On the 14th floor.
Oh,
I worked on the 11th floor.
There he is. There's Mike Terriga, who was trafficked in England. But yeah, there's Kevin Annett. He's the Reverend from Canada.
Wants an arrest warrant for Queen Elizabeth. But anyway, I love this story. You were 3 floors away from Buttigieg's investment.
So I was on the 11th floor. And the contracts that we dealt with the government. So Catholic Charities was divided into multiple businesses, and we were funded by the Archdiocese. Okay. Let's say the church mission ran under the nonprofit Catholic Charities, but Catholic Charities Community Services was a separate business that was able to get the government contracts for like food pantries, DACA, processing DACA, you know, dealing with individuals that had retardation, they needed housing and all that. So we, you know, any New Yorker that needed community services, that was through Catholic Charities Community Services, but we would get government funds. And this is interesting. Monsignor Sullivan was basically the CEO of Catholic Charities. All right. The executive director is their name, their official title. The executive director, it's like a CEO. So what was happening is that on speed dial was Senator Schumer. And every time there was an issue, this is during the Trump administration, every time there was an issue with the DACA and the Dreamers, ding, 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 he's on the phone with Schumer to try to get funds to funnel through Catholic Charities Community Services, because we had like 19 lawyers that were doing all the processing. And if you roll back the tape, it was at LaGuardia Airport where they did that, you know, and Kennedy Airport where they were having those protests with DACA, if you remember. And it was Catholic Charities director of legal services that was on the podium trying to support these people. But all that money was being funded from Schumer to Catholic Charities. And it gets even better. During Sandy, Hurricane Sandy, when it came in and destroyed, you know, Catholic Charities would help people that were in need because of Hurricane Sandy, especially for Staten Island. Staten Island was like destroyed. So FEMA money comes through the state level, through Governor Cuomo. Now, we were processing individuals that were hit hard by Sandy for a couple of years, maybe 2.5 years or so. The FEMA money was through a contract, and there were certain guidelines on what needed to be collected by roughly the 4 main nonprofits that were going to help process the FEMA contract. Catholic Charities was one. So was some of the Jewish organizations that are in New York. But there was an agreement before any money was spent, like the first 5 or 6 days right after the hurricane. There was an agreement from the government what the documentation needed to be. This is an important point that I'm making here. And that was, you know, that certain mileage had to be collected. What was the loss of, you know, what was the property loss for the client? You know, everything had to be documented. Okay. So there was an agreement to what would be documented before anything was processed. So that agreement was signed with FEMA, agreed with the governor of Cuomo, and everything's processed, and a claim is submitted. So the nonprofit kicks up upfront the cost to help the client in hopes that they would get 100% reimbursement through the state, through the FEMA money. Okay. So if I was a client, I lost and I needed help, and let's say I needed $10,000. All right. And I had documentation to prove that loss. All right. Then I would go to Catholic Charities or another organization that's tied into this whole FEMA network. And then I would get $10,000 after processing, dealing with a case manager. All right. That documentation, I get the money from the organization like Catholic Charities. All right. So I'm happy. I'm the client. All right. Catholic Charities would submit a claim within 60 days of the actual giving the money to the client. They would give it to the state and to FEMA to have it processed. And then Catholic Charities would get a reimbursement. All right. What happened after the 2.5 years, Governor Cuomo went to Catholic Charities and the other nonprofits and did a clawback and basically said, we're changing the process and we want further documentation over and beyond what was originally agreed upon. And he pocketed that money to fill in a hole in his budget. And so when people put, Cuomo up on stage and say he's such a great person, no, I have personally seen him rip off nonprofit organizations.
Yeah, Cuomo is, I mean, I won't say it's one of the families that benefited from heroin trade in New York, but I will say that Cuomo is a person who is an opportunist. His father was a great orator from New York, and it's so sad to see, even though his dad was very left and so forth. His dad had some ethics. This latest crew with the two brothers is about as bad as you can get. But I want to talk about another son and father-son combination, which is Peter Strzok Sr., who was a long-term CIA guy using the Catholic religion as a boiling pot to create wars in all these places like Guatemala.
A witch's brew.
And he used Catholic Family Services and USAID money to fund all these groups, including Guatemala, including Honduras, including all these places. It goes back to Avery Dulles, who was the archdiocese head dog in America, running the Catholic Church in America.
Avery Dulles was
the nephew of Alan Dulles.
Yeah, and he kind of rejected it, well, in a way, what his uncle did. Became
you think?
Bishop, but
yeah,
he became a cardinal though, wasn't
because yes, and he ran the whole schmeal. He ran the Catholic University in D.C. But this whole rift supposedly between the nephew Alan Dulles and Avery Dulles,
you don't buy it.
Don't buy it.
Okay.
He was a Calvinist. The reason why that Alan Dulles couldn't use being a Calvinist, which we are the only ones in heaven, we're predisposed to heaven. Everything else that happens was going to happen anyway. Predestination. When I filled your family full of bullet holes, that was predestined by God. So it wasn't me doing that. It was God. Okay. That was Alan Dulles, right? But he needed a lever arm with these populations all over the world because they wanted to get Rockefeller as oil, right? So what did they do? They went into these places, these churches and so forth. Well, first they put a whole bunch of Nazi paper clippers out there, supposedly bishops, and that they were being sent in from Malta, right? From the church, right? The sovereign order of the Catholic Church. And they would go in and they would foment revolution. And these priests would say, hey, that's your, cocaine field over there, not Johnny's or Juan's. And they would create these organizations like that are still around today. And then what happens? As soon as there's a revolution, like in Haiti or wherever, here comes the UN with money to burn. Here's the U.S. Congress funding the UN through NATO, pouring money. We're still pouring money into Haiti. Peter Strzok Sr. was involved in Haiti with Catholic Family Services 25 years ago. They're still pouring money through an organization called Minista. And they have all these, there's 14 of these things going on in Europe and Asia. But still, peacekeeping missions. The peacekeeping mission for Kosovo is still going. That was in 1999. They're still taking money. What do they do with the money for these organizations? I covered this 4 years ago with DynCorp. They train more armies. They give more money to mullahs to radicalize more people, to start more wars so they can get more money. And that's our next book, by the way, which is called At Dawn, They Struck. And it's spelled STRZ. Okay, at dawn, they struck.
The Dulles, I just wanted to say about the Dulles, very well said, George, by the way. The Dulles, Avery Dulles becoming a cardinal, it reminded me of the Pope Alexander VI making Cesare Borgia a cardinal. Just trying to keep it all in the family there.
That's the first thing I thought of. Where did you come up with Cesare Borgia? Come on now. Come on, man.
No, I mean, there's just so much corruption within that organization. I mean,
yeah, let's go back to Strzok though.
Yeah. No, I'm just joking. Isn't it nice to have a sidekick that throws in Cesare Borgia just to class up the joint?
Well, just like the nepotistic cardinal anointing, right? With Avery Dulles becoming a cardinal, where his his uncle and his dad are running the country, basically running the Western world in a large way.
Well,
And of
I'll
course,
tell you what. I mean, at 1011, there was such an uproar when Francis was anointed or elevated to cardinal.
Because
I mean,
he was
there
a
was
Jesuit.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
because he was Jesuit. Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Because everyone in the Catholic Church knows that the Jesuit order is your kind of like recruiting ground for the next level for the Knights of Malta spy guys, right? You're not necessarily in the club, but you're in the recruiting ground, right? Like Carter Page, you're a Jesuit kid coming up through a Jesuit university. You're in the system. It's kind of like you're in the farm team, and you can be chosen to be brought up to the big leagues if you play your cards right, like Carter Page did. And he was the translator for Warren Buffett in the Rosneft deal.
Well, I think it's a little bit it gets a little bit darker than that, George.
Okay. Do tell. You were inside the organization.
All right, the way I see it is that, let's say the typical Catholic priest, bishop, all right, non-Jesuit within the Vatican, they knew the atrocities they were doing with the children. They were hiding, all right? And it was pretty much basically, I won't say anything, you don't say anything, and everything will be okay. Where the Jesuits come in, and this is why they were scared, is to say, they go, I know what you did, I'm going to use it against you, unless you do what I want you to do.
Exactly. It's a control mechanism, and it's encouraged. And this, again, is Dennis McDonough. Dennis McDonough, who is the dark hand inside the Obama White House, and he goes back with the Strzok family 30 years. He's doing it with his brother in Minneapolis, where they had all this shit going on with these boys. And then at St. John's, where Strzok went, they had another huge one of these control compromise operations. And it started with Avery Dulles go all the way back to Boys Town, right? With the Boys Town scandal and the Franklin scandal. They've been using these, the Jesuit order, the dark hand, the Malta hand inside the Jesuit order has been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, and there was
they just so you know, on the 14th floor for the Knights of Malta, there's like 4 little old ladies that are running the phones. So
yeah. Of course. This couldn't be the droids you're looking for. And here's Pete Buttigieg flying his Eclipse plane, and he's dusting all these people in Egypt, and they're all dying in the thousands. And you got the 4 ladies answering the phones. I love it.
And I was in the C-suite, so I sat right next to the CFO, and once in a while we would see these Friar Tuck types come in, and they looked like Friar Tuck.
I have a message from the Pope.
No, that's
pages. They call them pages.
Yeah, and that's basically what was happening. It's just like, and it would move around. So it would go to Monsignor Sullivan, and then it would move its way up to the 19th floor, which was where Cardinal Dolan was, or is.
Well, and there is such a strong connection, and I think as you go back through your notes, you'll see the connection between Catholic Family Services and Knights of Malta, where that's the sword end of things. And there's this recruiter that Strzok had named Paul Whelan, who literally gave out Knights Templar swords. When he brought operatives in for the DNC, he gave Knights Templar swords. We have this guy, Paul, he's in prison right now in Russia for recruiting
16 years.
16 years for recruiting Russians and espionage. So people say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. Well, maybe it isn't a conspiracy theory.
No. On the 14th floor, there are pictures. I'm serious. There are about 4 or 5 pictures down their main hall when you go into their door, and then the 4 little old ladies, taking the phone calls. But down the main hall, there are 4 or 5 different pictures that actually have horses and they're drawings. They're like, they're like colorful drawings, and they have the Knights Templar along there, the connection between Knights of Malta and the Knights Templar.
Pete Buttigieg's uncle, right, or it could be his cousin, has written a history of the sovereign military order of the Knights of Malta. And the use, you know how the book starts, Paul? Here's how our greatness started. Using biological weapons in the siege of Malta. Using biological weapons by taking these dead carcasses that had died from bubonic plague
and throwing them over the wall.
And throwing them over the wall with trebuchets. That's how the Buttigieg history of the Knights of Malta begins.
We're going to have a dark winter.
A dark winter.
Said it again.
Dark winter.
Like, I think a week and a half ago, Biden said it.
Dark winter, for those who don't know it, was a exercise that was done at the National Defense University in 2002 with James Woolsey on how would you subdue the population if there ever was an insurrection, if they ever got mad about having an election stolen from them. How would we subdue the population and lock them down? The simulation was called Dark Winter. It was done in 2002.
Yeah, Operation Dark Winter. And he said it 3 times now. The first 2, of course, being on the final debate was when he said that we're going to have a dark winter. And I tweeted it almost immediately. And you know who responded was Larry Sanger, the founder of Wikipedia. He responded to me. So that was pretty cool.
Larry, I thought.
Well, what did he say? What did he say?
He was like, "Oh, that's what dark winter means, eh?" He's up on it. He's up on it.
There's two theories on the dark winter. The theory that you just brought up, and the other theory is that it's going to be the grid shutdown. That it's actually going to be electrical grid.
That's the same thing. That's the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that you don't go to that unless your psychological operations. If your psychological operations don't take, you have to shut down the electrical grid because that shuts down the internet.
That would send us all back to like
the Stone Age.
Dude, that like
if you lose the electricity, you go to the 17th century very quickly.
EMP and a bioweapon attack. That's
you don't need.
Well, I don't know if it would be an EMP. I'm just like, well, yeah,
just cut the internet.
These generators just failed, and if you hit the right point, you can shut down the whole quarter of the United States because there's like four main regions, and if you hit the right pressure point, you could shut down a whole region.
Yeah, this has been done many times, and you got to go by the signatures. The signature group is in the Ukraine group. It is Dmitry Alperovich's group. He maintains all these Eastern European hacking groups. One of the key places where Stuxnet was developed. Stuxnet was the thing that was used in Iran by General Cartwright. I thought Jamie Walls was the founder of Wikipedia. But
let me pull it up.
But you might be you might have a co-founder. But
I think there was multiple.
Yeah, there's probably multiple. But
co-founder, yeah, there you
co-founder, yeah, there you go. Show Lee because they always put these nice guys ahead of. Jamie Walls has an intelligence background. I didn't know Lee Sanger was even involved.
Larry Sanger.
Larry Sanger.
He seems to be, I don't know, he seems to be a part of the good guys. He definitely has a very good idea of what's going on. I follow him on Twitter.
And that's the problem with all these dark nights is there's always a good guy they front in front of them. And you have to look behind the good guy. You keep looking at the good guys and talking about the good guys, right? If you keep thinking Sidney Powell, you keep fighting that battle.
Right.
It doesn't allow you to go around Sidney Powell to who's manipulating Sidney Powell. So
right. I agree with you because when she was on stage and she wasn't bringing up Serbia, I'm like going, something smells fishy here. Something smells fishy.
There's no way they're that stupid.
Yeah, no, they're smart enough to put front men up. And here's the thing about the turning off the electricity. You put the Stuxnet in there, you go to a controller, like the Siemens controller that was inside the inside the centrifuges. You can display the output, the Homer Simpson, heads up display, to manage the whole nuclear power plant. And Homer Simpson thinks everything's fine. There's no red lights going blinkety, blinkety, blink. I've done this all my life with heads up displays, right? Meanwhile, the centrifuges are spinning 10 times faster than they should, or actually 10%. It causes a wobble and causes them to burn up. The same thing is true. We were talking about electric circuit breakers today. We put a whole bunch of power through a circuit, especially from dams or whatever that need to be controlled and have circuit breakers. And we just let that circuit breaker stay open and let that power overflow. We create a shutdown situation. That's what happened at St. Lawrence Seaway. I think it was 10 years ago. And it was you're right, Paul. It was like 13 states that got shut down because there's these fault safe systems that then get thrown into power. And you're right. It's going to be that area. It's going to be the Northeast where all the media people are. They're the ones that are going to have to feel the pain of the shutdown. They're going to say, see what you people did, you Trump people did. You caused a shutdown of our electrical grid.
So like around 2004, if I remember right, it was a blackout in New York in 2004. And they were blaming it on Canada. But the reality was they had something to do with one of our power generators. And the reason why I remember is I was actually in Japan.
Oh, I do remember that.
I was working. I was working at Nissan. It was around 2004, if I remember.
Yeah, it was. Canadians were blamed. That was the.
But it wasn't the Canadians. It wasn't the Canadians' fault. It had something to do with the generator. And I'll tell you what, something like that I think it's gonna happen this winter.
Stuxnet, and that's Peter Strzok again. Peter Strzok is related to Cartwright. And Cartwright was the guy who was the one who was in charge of the operation for Stuxnet. I'm telling you, he's run this hacker group in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Harry the Greek did a great expose on it with Dmitry Alperovich and his dad out of Pittsburgh. That's the first place that this cyber hacking group got a foothold. And then Strzok worked immediately underneath Dmitry Alperovich. It's going to be the answer to the test, folks. If you're going to see the attacks, they're going to come from the same people that are trying to protect their previous attacks. It's like a John Dillinger or Bonnie and Clyde. They've done 50 bank jobs. You get in their way as a police officer or a newspaper man, they're going to mow you down. But it's going to be the same people. It's not going to be somebody who's just walking down the street going, wow, I think I'll overthrow the president of the United States today. No, it's to see people who did it in 2016. So anyway, I know I've made that point a couple times, so I'll settle down.
So Addy, did you see the video about the protests about the Federal Reserve stopping the Federal Reserve? We think it's in Pennsylvania. There's a video going viral on Facebook and Twitter.
People protesting
I
the Federal
obtained
Reserve.
Wait, say it again.
People are protesting the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, they want to stop the Federal Reserve, and they were marching like in military. There was like a military march. There's some people that were in the rally were military guys, and they had flags that showed Marine Corps.
Were they armed?
And they basically, it didn't look like they were armed, but it wasn't just like 50. I mean, it was hundreds and hundreds of people walking that street.
That's surprising.
And they just kept on chanting, "Stop the Fed, or in the Fed, in the Fed."
You know, that smacks of psyops to me because, no, I'll tell you why. These guys, they never write a new script.
Yeah.
Bannon never writes a new script. That's Whiskey Rebellion. If you go back to the
sounds like it, yeah, it does sound.
Go back to other centuries. Is that okay, George?
Yeah. If you want to go to a script, this is the rules, okay? If you're going to talk about a CIA operation, right, you have to talk about a previous script. You have to footnote it to a previous script. If you want to footnote the Whiskey Rebellion, a bunch of people from Pennsylvania didn't want to pay Washington's whiskey tax, marched on Washington. Washington met them with federal troops. If you want to go smash a whole bunch of Trump people now with federal troops, you now have precedent. Washington did it. Mm-hmm. Now we can go smash them. Mm-hmm. We could call them the Washington Whiskey Smashers. Let's, have a new, let's start a fundraiser. Let's start a GoFundMe. You'll see this happen. There'll be a GoFundMe for these people that want to put down these anti-Fed people. That's smacks so psyop to me. But go ahead, Addy. Go ahead with your non-psyop.
No, I wasn't gonna say it's not a psyop or not. I was just wondering if I'm allowed permission to go out of this century or
Yes,
not,
yes.
since you yelled at me before about
I yelled at you now.
the Borgia reference, but now we're going back to whiskey rebellion.
Well, you always say I don't footnote. Addy's footnoting everything. Addy's footnoting everything.
I got a footnote, people.
Okay.
I gotta,
So the big knock on me is I don't footnote. Addy's Mr. Footnote. He said, we got to footnote that. I said, do you know what that means? Yeah, I know what it means. Well, there might be somebody who doesn't know what it means, so we're going to do a footnote. So he's Mr. Footnote. Yeah. So why don't you footnote?
Not everyone has 175 IQ, George.
Okay. So now why don't you tell? That's not that high. Why don't you tell me who the Borgia stick guy is? Why don't you footnote yourself? Who's the Borgia stick guy?
Oh, we're going back to Borgia.
Yeah. You're allowed to go anywhere you want.
Okay. Well, I was just connecting the Avery Dulles Cardinal, because he obviously got anointed Cardinal because of his dad and his uncle.
Right.
To the Pope Alexander VI, otherwise known as Rodrigo Borgia, made his son Cardinal.
This is in the 1600s?
This is the 1600s. You got it, George.
Yeah, okay.
So I was just drawing that parallel to the nepotism within the Catholic church.
Okay, so I don't know.
But
can we do a little bit of a spin out here, Paul?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because there was the Borgia stick, right, which was supposedly a walking stick used by the Pope, and they took it to Odessa, I believe, because all these Nazis were fleeing out of the old, the Peter Strzok's dad and grandfather and all those folks. They were fleeing out of the eastern part of the Berlin part and the Poland part, the Pale, going down to Odessa. Those guys went down to Odessa. That's the Strzok connection to Ukraine now, right? And they gave them the Borgia stick, which was sort of like giving them the Pope's ring. They had
like a scepter?
Yeah, it was like a scepter or something, but I remember the movie, it was called The Borgia Stick, and it was associated with this Odessa plan to bring all these ex-Nazis down to Ukraine, to Odessa. The Odessa File was another movie that was done on this, and I'm pretty sure it goes back to the Borgia Stick. So somebody run that down.
Wow, I did not know that. But yeah, I love 16th, 15th century Renaissance history. Really fascinating stuff there.
And I'll go you one better. I believe that the popes in the 1400s or 1500s were killing each other, the red and the white Guelphs, right in the 1400 time frame. And Machiavelli makes his appearance at this point, saying you guys are doing it all wrong. You're killing each other in the open. You got to do it secretly, and you got to have somebody else kill everybody, and then we kill the killer, and all this kind of like dark hand stuff.
And Machiavelli, who is genius in my eyes, you'd like this, George. He made the argument against mercenaries because there's no loyalty, there's no fealty for mercenaries. There's always more money that can be, given to them. Someone has more money always, right? So he was an advocate for having men of the city be defenders of the city rather than outsourcing that, right? And that's what we're seeing worldwide with this Eric Prince Blackwater situation, where the entire war industry is being privatized. And that is just a recipe for, well, first, in the short term, a lot of money, but in the long term, a lot of cloak and dagger and instability, because these men have they have no fealty to. Likewise with Strzok, and they say they're loyal to the United States, but they aren't. They're warlords, really, and that's the problem.
I think the only way to kind of like ramp that whole mercenary industry down is to actually reduce the number of special forces that we train. See, what happens with the special forces is that they're so highly trained they can't get a job after they get out of the service. So the only thing they can do is they'll go and work for a contractor,
and then they'll make 3 or 4 times or 5 times.
Right. But the thing is they're so highly trained, as a warrior. They're the samurai of today, right?
Right.
But if it, but after their service is done, what do?
See, this is
why
they
go work for Blackwater.
This is why Prather is such an exception, and it's such a window into the special forces world, because he's the guy who said, I'm not going to go do that.
Yeah.
He does personal defense and all that.
He's driven by a higher purpose.
He really is.
To God.
But the thing is what's the reason why he has that higher purpose? He has that spiritual connection. You know,
Right.
he's developing and cultivating that spiritual connection with his
Right.
religion.
Right.
A lot of these people, they don't do that.
Right.
Their religion is the dollar. It's the money. And when you don't have morality, a core set of morals, this thing can get spin out of control, like what you were mentioning in previous epochs.
Struck always used the mice. He called it the mice acronym.
Peter likes it too.
Yeah, Peter Duke likes it. He talks about money is one way to influence somebody, but ideology is the one that they love to go after. You know, you're going to reunite the Catholic nation of Italy. I think that Machiavelli was all about reuniting Italy, right? Or maybe he was against reuniting Italy, but I think the reunification of Italy, which then comes true later on with Emilio Vittorio or Emmanuel Vittorio or whatever his name was, that eventually comes true. But Colby goes there, CIA director Colby there after World War II, and he uses that to create a kind of a super nationalistic right-wing death squads. He hires a bunch of Russians to go down and live at Forte de Marmi to create a false flag Red Brigade to foment anti-communist feelings and money and politics. So all this, we just have to keep looking at this history, because I think this has been used in Italy.
Well, then we saw like the terrorism, right, in the mid 20th or late towards it was like 70s and 80s.
The Red Brigade,
huge terrorism attacks or frequent terrorism attacks in Italy.
Yeah, and they're just replaying these same things over and over. You know, this same script over and over because it works. I wanted to go someplace after you were at the Borgia Stick, but I got lost somewhere with Jeff Prather. But I think you're right that there is too much special forces, and I do see some wacky stuff happening right now with special forces. Jeff's take on it is different than mine. I see David Petraeus as working with General Shelton. General Shelton was this guy who started JSOC. JSOC is Joint Special Operations Command in Florida. Well, SOCOM is the whole command, Special Operations Command in Tampa, Florida. But JSOC, which is just this warrior community, it's like the old Jedburghs in the OSS, is in Fayetteville, North Carolina. We've gone there a lot in our series. And that command, after the election, was just taken over by Ezra Cohen Watnick, Flynn's protege.
Who Prather thinks is cute.
And I believe he is Q. I mean, the whole Tony Schaefer, Mike Flynn, that whole group, maybe Persobic's in there, is a Q group. But you also have the Chris C. Miller, who's the new acting Defense Department. He took JSOC and took it out of reporting directly to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and now it reports directly to him. To me, that doesn't sound good. Kash Patel, who was also working as the chief of staff for Devin Nunes, and he was doing all the interviews of all the Russia hoax guys, the 51 interviews of the Russia hoax people. He's now at the Defense Department as the Deputy Secretary of Defense for Information Warfare. To me, it sounds like they're getting ready for the dark winter. I know how hard that is to believe for Flynn folks, but are they bringing forward this Belgrade situation? Did they set these spy traps that we think they set? Are they going to have this big whammy that we're being promised with Sidney Powell? I don't think so, because they're not in the right theater of war. They're down in South America and Central America, way out of the action. If I start hearing about Peter Strzok, we got a little bit of battery left, Paul. If I start hearing about Peter Strzok in Belgrade, I know they're on the right track. But until then, I'm not buying it.
Well, and we've been going at it for about 2 hours now.
Okay.
But you know, I don't want you to run out of battery here. But before closing, what's the best way that the subscribers? I've been getting some emails and some comments in the chat box, Addy, on how people can help support your work financially.
Oh
So
wow.
what's the best way that people can either donate or to, you know, to help you out?
Sure. Thank you, Paul. I have a GoFundMe. I have a PayPal, which a lot of people like to use, as well as Patreon. And you can pick your dollar amount you want. You can do $1 if you want, or you can do $1,000 if you want. It's up to you. And then I have Subscribestar as well. I just got my first Subscribestar the other day.
It's Addy.ads, ADDYADDS.
Yep, ADDYADDS on Patreon. And
So if you're ADD, even if you're ADD, you can remember ADDYADDS.
indeed, yeah. And I do want to thank my my Patreons for supporting me, the ones that have supported me thus far, as well as the donors. And please subscribe to me as well. I am not getting promoted on the recommended videos very much, so you kind of have to search me out to find me, as it were. There's probably some shadow banning going on there. So if you subscribe and like, I also have brand new tube. Twitter actually has been growing pretty good as well, and I know you reinstated your Twitter recently, Paul. But Neighborhood News Studio as well is where you can find George and myself. And George, of course, is always welcome on my channel as well. So if you want to find George Webb, subscribe to Neighborhood News Studio and my channel as well. And George also has a Patreon. If people want to support George Webb, it's just George Webb on Patreon. And I think that's it. I mentioned my brand new tube. I'm also trying to update to the other sites as well, like Brighteon, and there's this new one called Utah Gun Academy or Gun Exchange. Rumble is another new one. So I got a referral link for that in my description box as well. And then, of course, Paul Cottrell has a store and a Patreon too. People want to support and subscribe to him.
Right. And also, people need to buy George's books. I have the link in the description box. Buy the books.
Please do.
And if a Peter Struck has inserted a few misspellings, don't let that stop you. The content is great. Bob Alinsky came on and confirmed it all. It is Belton Road. It is Warren Buffett. It is Rosneft. It is Carter Page doing the translations. So see, all these guys were doing this Belton Road. Papadopoulos was doing the Belton Road, doing the East Med pipeline. Carter Page was doing the pipeline across China and across Russia, right? They're all the pipeline guys that have worked energy security together. You need a Q clearance, by the way, to work for the Department of Energy in the security section. So anyway, just some interesting stuff. The Borgia stick apparently doesn't have the references to the Catholic religion, just the company, which is the CIA. So I'll go back to the Borghesi's and the Borgia stick, and we'll run that down for next show.
Okay. I love Italian history. Let's do it, George. But we're focusing on his book right now. So we're writing George's stuff, editing it, footnoting it, as George said as well, and then doing interviews too, so chatting with people.
Well, I think you guys are doing great work, and I am I'm glad to view you as friends and colleagues, and it's amazing just in 1 year what has been accomplished during this crisis.
Paul, thank you for being, I don't know how you do it, doing everything you do, but keep doing what you're doing, and get some sleep too.
Well, I got to study for a test. So, but
all right,
okay, let me stop the recording here.
Thanks,
okay,
Paul.
thank you.